Throughout history, those empires that were profoundly racist did not give up those racist practices very easily. They most often reinvented those racist practices with much more sophistication. They often developed racist systems better suited with the changing times, methods that are not as easily recognized by their victims. This is the hidden situation that now presently exists for Black people living under white dominance. Those of us who now insist that we are no longer being oppressed and that it's now ourselves that are our worst enemies are in fact naive, gullible, and clueless of our true reality. The true hidden reality is that although most Black people no longer experiences the type of white racist oppressive tactics that our grandparents had done so, we, however, still do experience them. Black people are still victims of white racist oppressive tactics, and white oppressive forces are still in fact our worst enemies. This reality has been deliberately removed from our collective consciousness by the white media's propaganda campaigns that exaggerates the issue of Black on Black crime. It's how they've manipulated millions of Black people to perceive ourselves as being our own worst enemies. This reality has also been deliberately removed from our collective consciousness by the white media's propaganda campaigns that constantly showcases millionaire Black athletes and entertainers that actually makes up less than 1% of the total Black population in the US. The media's oversaturation of these 1% creates and sustains the illusion that we're no longer being oppressed. But the reality is that Black people are still being oppressed. When those blatant white racist subjugation and oppression tactics used in the past against Black people had become no longer socially acceptable with the changing times and had resulted in unprecedented unified Black protests, the white oppressors merely abandoned those blatant tactics and instead developed more covert methods. These covert methods are very sophisticated, so much more sophisticated that the comparison can be made that the earlier methods used in the past had a GED and today's method has a PhD. Unlike the blatant racist Jim Crow methods that Black people could have easily identified and unify ourselves against, today's methods are not easily recognized nor are easily comprehended by most of the Black victims. They provide the white oppressors with their most effective system used for subjugating and oppressing Black people, because the subjugation and oppression of Black people always works best when the Black victims no longer recognizes how it works. It's so effective that it allows the white oppressors to continue subjugating and oppressing Black people while simultaneously misleading Black people to believe that it's ourselves that are now our worst enemies. Therefore, rather than unifying ourselves to overcome these modern subjugation systems, we instead fight against ourselves, believing that we're our worst enemies. Therefore, the white society now subjugates and oppresses us without any Black resistance. The subjugation of Black people always works best when the Black victims no longer recognizes how it's being done. Black people's unawareness of these modern subjugation tactics is the white oppressor's greatest weapon against us. In order for we Black people to liberate ourselves, we must first learn of these many covert subjugation tactics that white oppressive forces presently employs against us. This is why those of us who knows of them must teach African proverb. These modern racist subjugation tactics presently deployed against Black people are as followed. Number 1, demoralize, divide, and rule. Number 2, manufactured consent to mistreat. Number 3, gaslighting warfare. And number 4, brainwash to adhere to white dominance through miseducation. Let's begin with the first one, Demoralize, divide, and rule. Demoralize, divide, and rule is the method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization in order to create self-hate and division between the targeted population. This is precisely what's being done to the black population by white propagandists. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is so much more than just biased media reporting. It is actually a black racially demoralizing, divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. This psychological warfare campaign is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects the black population to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about ourselves. Within this psychological warfare system, fraudulent black racially demoralizing propaganda is being pumped unrelentingly into the unsuspecting mind of the black population without being challenged nor counterbalanced by any equal amount of positive black racially affirming information. Its constant daily assault of fraudulent negative black narratives are designed to demoralize us, divide us, create black self-loathing, and it shifts black collective aggressions away from the white oppressive society and redirects it against ourselves. It also conveys a subliminal message that black people are inferior to whites and that we are our own worst enemies and that we therefore need whites to govern over our lives. And it insinuates that black people should admire, respect, and trust only whites. Its ultimate objective is to demoralize the black population to such an extent that we therefore believe that we really inherently need the white society to govern over us. And then we therefore abandon all hopes of ever liberating ourselves. It also attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. This psychological warfare system is extremely effective because when black people are constantly presented with propaganda from trusted white media sources, constantly telling us the fraudulent worst possible narratives about ourselves, it can be very difficult to resist its implied propaganda programming, especially when the propaganda is being told daily and so unrelentingly. No group can be constantly subjected to receiving only the fraudulent worst narratives about themselves and not be negatively impacted. It's not possible. This psychological warfare system is the true reason why many black people now perceive ourselves as being our worst enemies and reveres the white oppressors in spite of such a brutally horrific history. To the contrary, it's the truth of our plight and condition. It works because the oppressed will always believe the fraudulent worst about themselves. That's a quote from Frantz Fanon. The second tactic on the list is called manufactured consent to mistreat. The success of the 1960s civil rights movement was greatly due to the national and global support that was attained by Dr. King's nonviolent strategies. The global responses in support of African Americans were immense. It eroded the U.S. government's global image and standing in the world. African Americans were favorably perceived by millions of people around the world as being a dignified people pursuing an equality that we should have been born with. Dr. King was even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. These global responses in support of African Americans totally embarrassed the white establishment. White oppressive forces realized then that to continue their subjugation of African Americans as a means of maintaining their nation's white social dominance, that it had become necessary to create societal consent to do so. They therefore deployed a propaganda campaign called manufactured consent to mistreat. Manufactured consent to mistreat is when the oppressors create media propaganda that falsely vilifies and criminalizes the image of the oppressed in order to create a consensual setting that falsely justifies the mistreatment of the oppressed. It's an old Nazi propaganda tactic that was also used in Germany against the Jews. This propaganda campaign is what is presently being deployed against the black population. Through lies and manufactured news reports, black people are being portrayed as a major problem of the white society. More specifically, black people are being made to appear as being the most unethical group, thereby creating a false impression of wanton black criminality and violence. These deplorable depictions creates a shifting of victimization on behalf of the white society and lessens pressure for social change on behalf of the black population. Moreover, they create prejudice, distorted perceptions, and beliefs about the black population that are designed to make the nation and the entire world insensitive to our plight. They also create contemptuous feelings about the black population. It makes them appear as all justified. When contempt of the black population is made to appear as being justifiable, this creates conditioned responses within the society that allows eventualities to unfold against the black population without any opposition. It creates a consensual national setting of where in which black people are disproportionately incarcerated, given stiffer sentences, and are more likely than any other racial group to be treated brutally. It's also the reason why white cops can routinely kill unarmed innocent black people and avoid being prosecuted by merely saying that they were fearful of losing their lives at the time of the incident. The third one on the list is gaslighting psychological warfare. The term gaslighting is usually associated with individual abusive relationships, in which one person is mentally abused for the benefit of the other. However, the white establishment used that same gaslighting tactic to mentally abuse the black population. Black people are the unknowing victims within a psychologically abusive relationship with a narcissistic white society that gaslights us unrelentingly. Within this gaslighting scenario, the protests and grievances of the black population are never fully acknowledged nor legitimized by the white establishment. The white establishment instead always presents counter narratives that deflects attention away from the black protests. Through this practice, information is always twisted, spun, and or selectively omitted to always favor the oppressors. This practice is continued until the black protesters begin to doubt the merit of our own protests, and we eventually stop protesting, having gained no grounds on the presented issue. This gaslighting warfare strategy allows the white establishment to, rather than addressing the grievances and protests presented by the black population, to instead divert and distract from the protests. Case, point, and proof. Remember when Colin Kaepernick kneeled in silent protest against the routine killing of innocent unarmed black people by white cops? And the white establishment responded by labeling him as being unpatriotic? That response was actually a gaslighting distraction tactic that oppressors used to deflect the protests of the black population. This is how the white establishment subdued the kneeling protests by black athletes without ever confronting the issue. They just kept deflecting from it until the black athletes became mentally fatigued and stopped protesting, while the issue of white cops routinely killing unarmed black people was never addressed, therefore never stopped. Even the All Lives Matter slogan is a gaslighting response. All Lives Matters has never been the ideology held by the white society. That statement is now merely being used as a counter narrative to deflect against the black population's declaration that Black Lives Matters. It's intentionally designed to diffuse the moral statement of Black Lives Matters while diverting attention away from the issue of white cops routinely killing innocent unarmed black people. Within this gaslighting psychological warfare system, the white establishment is never acknowledged as being morally wrong and the black oppressed are never acknowledged as being morally correct. The white society instead continues creating false counter-narratives that deflects from the black protests. This is continued until many of the black protesters begin to doubt their reasons for protesting, thinking that if their cause isn't being recognized by the white dominant society, then perhaps it lacks merit. The minds of targeted populations are quite easy to manipulate if they're unaware of what's being done to them. Once minds have been confused, manipulation becomes simple. The mind will even ignore common sense, and rationality falls away, even overlooking hypocrisy and deception. And last but not least, here's the truth of what's actually being done to black people during our entire educational development. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide black students with a racially affirming curriculum, as it routinely does so for white students, is actually essential for maintaining white social dominance. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over the subordinate oppressed population, they must condition the oppressed from a very early age to accept their own subordinate status within the society and to adhere to the authority of the dominant culture. To do so, the education given to the oppressed from a time that their minds are young and most impressionable must be the type that denies them of a racially affirming education while educating them only to get favorable information about the dominant society. This conditions the subordinate population to perceive themselves as being inherently inferior, and it makes them adhere to the dominance of the dominant society. This is what's being done to black people through our miseducation. So therefore, those of you who say we are not being oppressed are ignorant of your own ignorance. This is our true reality. It's time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.